I met him when I was 20, and then we ended up living together quite quickly. And then we spent a lot of time with just the two of us. And I was very naive. So when I went into this relationship, I didn't have my eyes open, or I had my eyes open to the point of all that I could see at that time. But looking back, and over the period of time after we finished, it then became apparent that his behaviour was actually quite controlling, and that he had his own personality issues going on with the depression, which I wasn't aware of when I was in the relationship. And then the destruction that causes to myself and to my family, actually, with his behaviour patterns. But at the time, I wasn't able to acknowledge that he had manic depression, and it was diagnosed by a psychiatrist after we finished. So then it became clearer, but that destructive pattern.
So say a little bit more about that destructive pattern.
The destructive pattern is very up and down. One day he would be perfectly okay, and then another day he would just be very withdrawn, very quiet, very aggressive. He wouldn't communicate at all, and to me it manifested as if it was my issue, and that I was the one causing him the problems, and that's how it felt.
That's how it felt. Did he say anything or do anything in particular?
Yes, I mean yes, because he would. We'd be mid conversation and he would just walk out. So it was very directed towards me, and it was very. He just wasn't doing. He wouldn't join in anything sort of with my family or around the house, and he'd be in this very low mood, and it was my fault.
So it just felt like that all the time.
Yeah. And the way he spoke to me, and he would actually say it. I mean, obviously I can't remember the exact words that he used, but it would be said verbally in his communication to me that it was my fault.
And that's a very damning experience for a young,
for
anybody, but when you're so young,
and when you're very naive as well, to not know that it could possibly be something else. We were together for 2.5, 3 years, and it took me quite a while to turn around and say, hang on a minute, your behaviour is not acceptable.
What made you realise that it wasn't acceptable and you didn't want any more?
I think so many things happened. I think the same thing kept happening again and again and again, and then people started, like friends and family started to say things to me, and then you start to look at it with fresh eyes.
What was your reaction to your friends and family saying things?
Initially, I wouldn't have anything said against him. I didn't accept it. I didn't really start taking in what they were saying until probably the last 6 months, where I had to have been, taken a fair bit before I would acknowledge that there was a problem, and that the problem actually wasn't me. It took a long time.
And it's very tricky, isn't it, when you're immersed in something?
And
in an emotional and intimate relationship, it's really tricky to take that step back, I guess.
Yeah. And where do you go with it? Because family are just, they're just going to say to you, that person's no good. Well, actually, there's no point doing that, because you want somebody to tell you why that person is behaving like they are. But I don't think that person knows why they're behaving like they are either. So, in hindsight, if it happened to me now, then I would go with that person to get help, and then I would also take support on how to interact with them, and for it to be a more proactive experience rather than one that was shoved under the carpet, and there's just this underlying tension that runs through everything that you do.
Yes, permeates, exactly. It's so insidious, isn't it?
It is. It's like that cloud that, you walk through the door and you know what mood you're going into, and you think, oh, here we are again, and then you don't know quite what to do with it. And at 20, when you're very naive 20,
yes, exactly.
What do you do with it? He was a very funny man. He had a fantastic sense of humour. We would have this, these days of high humour, and I'd have so much fun with him. So And I guess the reason I stayed with him so long as well was because there was just this amazing side to the relationship, which was very funny, and it was very full on, and
Yes.
you know, we had lots of fun, and you know, did lots of stuff.
Yes.
But it's like you had to pay the price for that amazing time, and I kind of accepted that for quite a while, that there was this flip side.
Did you think that was sort of normal behaviour?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, because he was my first relationship, really. I'd been out with people before, but never for very long, and never so involved. And he was the first person I lived with. He was the first person I really got close to intimately. So there was a lot of emotions going on there, and I had nothing to compare it to.
Yes.
So, as you say, it was what I considered to be a normal situation. It took me a long time to work out this wasn't normal. And in fact, it's probably took me many years to work out that it wasn't normal.
Even after it had ended?
Yeah, because it doesn't, you know, the effect, and even now I think there probably is some effect.
So it sounds like you've gone through a real journey.
Yeah, which I guess is mixed in with normal life as well.
Yeah.
And also you've got to take responsibility for your own part in things, because I let him believe that his behaviour was acceptable at the time, and really I should have made it quite clear that, well, if I'd have known to make it clear.
Well, that's it. If you'd known, that's the thing, isn't it?
And I didn't know.
Yeah, and so that's what I think is really important, is that you didn't know.
Yeah, and there is nowhere, it's not spoken about either, and it definitely, I don't remember reading anything or seeing anything, and the internet wasn't really around then.
No, exactly.
So there's no information, and it didn't even cross my mind that it was an issue to go to the library to look it up. I just considered it was my issue, and there was something I was doing that was irritating him.
Yes.
And I felt that for a long time, and that I was the root cause behind his mood.
And I think a lot of partners do have that feeling, whether you've been with somebody for a very short period of time, maybe if you're very young, or if you've been with somebody for a very long period of time, you kind of normalise the behaviour.
Yeah.
And so what would be your advice? What would you like to see happen to help other people who might be going through a similar situation to yourself?
I think the profile of the issue needs to be raised enough for people to have some tips on what to look for, but to be aware that actually, hang on a minute, this might not be my issue. This might be someone else's issue, because that's the biggest thing, is to acknowledge this is not your issue.
Yes. And what sound advice that is for somebody who's particularly
young, for anybody really, because I guess you know, you could be living with someone for 20 years, and at some point they suffer from depression, and there is no reason why you wouldn't behave in the same way if you didn't have the knowledge to go looking somewhere else for information.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing, isn't it? You've just probably got a bit more, or the person would have a little bit more world knowledge to maybe query it more than a naive 20-year-old would.
Well, I think, you know, very often people don't query it because
you don't see it.
You don't see it.
I mean, I really didn't see it.
No. But why would you? I always think it's really important that everybody knows something about depression and anxiety, which, you know, they go hand in hand very often.
Yeah. It needs to be normalised and become an acceptable subject for discussion. And normalises it, isn't it? Because the more people talk about it, then the more it's not that thing that you shove away in the cupboard.
Absolutely.